organizations. You know, Mr. Pallone, you talked about all the canceled policies, and, you know, we've heard all of the discussion about, you know, some of these are naturally occurring, which I don't disagree, but you obviously don't have the mass of cancellations. We've never seen anything like this before. Have we ever seen the mass cancellations that we've seen up to this point? Have we ever seen that? Yes.
In my experience.
Well, either one of, both of you.
You know, I can't give you the numbers. I mean, look, as I said, and I don't want to keep repeating the same thing, the reasons for the cancellation are varied.
And I agree. But
I mean,
have we ever seen,
and
I understand you're saying that, but have we ever seen in history the number of cancellations at a given time that reached the magnitude that we have today?
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, that's
say,
okay to answer if you say I don't know.
Well, I don't, because I haven't gotten to compilation of it. But what I guess I'm trying to point out to you that is, I don't think the fact that they get a cancellation notice is as significant as whether or not they can find a policy that's better for a lower price. That's my
second thing, and you said then go to the exchange. The problem is, and you've said it yourself, the exchange in and of itself is broken, so they have nowhere to go.
Well, they do. I mean, look, I don't want to get into that. They can. There's various ways to go.
You said that, and I'm just repeating.
Well, because I don't think people should rely so much on the website. I think they could go to 800 number, go to insurance agents, various ways.
But if they go to 800 number, don't they still have to input that into the website?
They don't personally.
Well, somebody does.
Somebody does, right? Correct. But the only thing I'm trying to say is that you're putting all the emphasis on the cancellation notice. I think what's really key is when I get a cancellation notice, do I have an alternative, either with that company or on the health exchange? That's what's the key. And yes, because we are transitioning from
this I guess goes to the core of it, and you've heard this so many times. The president has repeated it so many times. He's apologized for what he said, or the way he said it, because nobody saw the asterisk after the period. Nobody saw the asterisk after the period, so that's why he had to apologize. End of the day, it is important to people that have their insurance canceled. It may not, you know, you can come up with all kinds of things, well, you know, they can do this or they can do that. But if I have insurance, do you get that part? Is that they didn't want to lose their insurance?
I don't get that part, because I think people routinely...
Because they're not broad enough to understand it themselves.
No, because in the individual market, people often get cancellation notice. It's a question of where you go.
Let's get past that. I mean, you keep going back to that, but this is unique. And Dr. Burgess, maybe you want to answer. Maybe you haven't answered. Has this ever happened where you've had mass cancellations like this?
Certainly not in my experience. I think Mr. Woodall is exactly right. What we're doing today is not going to solve the problem. We're trying to stop the bleeding. Look, there's going to be other problems right around the corner. We're not dealing with any of those today. The access problems, they're going to happen when patients show up at the hospital or the doctor's office with an insurance card that they think provides them coverage, but they don't understand what a $6,000 deductible means, and that they're going to have to write a big check, or they stop paying for their policy after the first 2 weeks, but they can't be dropped for 3 months. Someone is going to eat that charge somewhere along the way. So we will see those access problems. That will likely be the next wave of difficulties that we have to contend with. We're not solving the problems inherent to the Affordable Care Act today. We're trying to stop the hemorrhaging from all of these cancellations that you have.
And see, that's one of the problems I have with this piece of legislation is the fact that we're not fixing a thing. I mean, we're doing a short-term fix for people, hopefully, you know, that won't lose their insurance. And I'm glad to hear, you know, what my colleague from Florida said about Florida Blue. That's great. But at the end of the day, in the end of 2014, or whenever this expires, the edict from the president expires, they're going to lose their insurance. I mean, as sure as anything, they're going to lose it. Now, maybe the website will be up and running by then, and, you know, maybe pigs will fly. I don't know. But they're still going to lose their insurance that I guess most of them like. Is that true?
If you wanted me to predict the future for a year from now, I think the cost of the renewal policies that people will begin to see in September are going to be so astonishingly high, that will be the next large-scale reduction in insurance policy where people say, I just simply cannot afford the cost for a $6,000 deductible policy.
I've heard from, actually, an insurance agent, they don't sell health insurance, they sell all kinds of other insurance, and he said, he's being canceled, and he found out what the rate would be under the Affordable Care Act. He's going to pay more for his family coverage for he and his wife. He's going to pay more, and his deductible is going to be 3 times higher than what it is today. So how is that a good deal?
It ain't.
Never will be.
Never was, never will be.
Dr. Burgess, I know you got to be a real bright guy to be a physician. I wasn't. I was only, a cop. But you wrote a letter where I think you identified this problem early on, and I heard other members say that the president didn't know. He doesn't seem to know much about a lot of things that go on, but you seem to identify the problem that there was going to be cancellations, a lot of cancellations. Is that true?
Yes. The letter was dated May of 2010.
Are you an actuary?
No, as a consequence of, at the time, being the ranking member on the Oversight Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce, we had received a lot of data from, and actually this was not in the individual market, this was in the large group market, companies that would be fined if they did not provide coverage or if their employees sought subsidies in the exchange. The amount of the fine was significant, but it was still way less than the cost of the coverage. So people did the quick calculation and found that if they were a particularly large company, they might save millions, if not billions of dollars by simply paying the fine. And that shift from people from employer coverage then to the exchange coverage would be large and dramatic.
Do you believe that no one in the administration, I'm not saying the president knew, but no one in the administration thought that this could be a reality, that this could happen?
It would be wrong for me to project. I mean, I don't get consulted by the administration. They don't ask for my advice and counsel, and they've not sought it.
But you saw
it.
But you saw it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everyone who was in this Congress saw it. Everyone who was in this hearing room the night we marked up this thing had to have been able to see that.
So I guess what amazes me is that those that crafted this, that pushed this through, obviously at the president's behest. I mean, he wanted this. It's his signature legislation. I get it. I understand it. I think it's admirable that he and those that were in power at that time wanted to do what they thought was the right thing. But you hear all the stuff about adverse consequences, but this is one that you should have identified, or at least you did.
I think so. Now, I was here as were many people on the dais. We did town halls in the summer of 2009, August of 2009. They were some of the roughest town halls I've ever been in. I mean, normally I'd get 24 people in Denton, Texas on a Saturday morning in August. I got 2,000 people show up. They were all mad about, at that point, what was still a committee product. But what were people telling us during those town halls? 2 things. First off, don't destroy the system that is arguably working for 2/3 of the country. The second thing was, if you're going to do anything at all, could you please help us with costs? Well, I just ask you, how's it looking today? It looks like we're going to destroy the system for everyone in order to fix some problems in the individual and small group market, and costs are going to go through the roof. Again, I submit by September of 2014, when the insurance companies are having to price the risk for carrying policies where there wasn't the sign-up by the demographic that the administration assured them that would sign up if there was an individual mandate, those costs now are going to have to be distributed for a smaller population that is inherently a higher utilizer of medical services, people with chronic diseases, the ones who will spend the time on the website getting through so that they can sign up because they know they got real problems. The other guys have gone fishing. The low-risk folks are going to give up. But that cost is going to be staggering. So what have we done? We destroyed the system as it was working with all the faults that it had, the large group market, didn't have problems with pre-existing conditions. Some of the lifetime limits, but for the most part, you just never heard that happening. I practiced for 25 years. I think I got 2 notices from bankruptcy court not to proceed with any debt collection. Not that I was doing so, but that 2 patients had had their obligations discharged in bankruptcy. 2 over 25 years. I mean, this was not a problem that encountered a couple of times a week or a couple of times a month. 2 over a quarter century. Yes, people who get into trouble financially sometimes will have medical obligations, and those can be discharged in a bankruptcy court, but that was not the reason they filed bankruptcy. It was their credit card debt. It was something else that pushed them in, or some other life event that pushed that to require that to happen. It wasn't my charge for delivering a baby or doing a surgery. But look, everyone knew when this thing went down in 2009 what lay just ahead. But people chose to ignore and to some degree, magical thinking. And I don't mean to be critical, but I think it was magical thinking down at the White House that they could just simply make this work. September of 2009, after the summer town halls, the president came and addressed a joint session of Congress. You may recall it was a kind of famous night because he and a gentleman from South Carolina got into a little bit of a floor debate that some people felt was inappropriate. But the president said during that speech that if you lie about my plan, if you misrepresent my plan, I'll call you out. But who's been the one that's been consistently misrepresenting? Well, it's actually been the White House. You know, it's time to call it what it is.
It almost feels like there's been a fraud perpetrated on us in regards to the comments that were made about just what we've talked about, what the president has said, and what the president's apologized for, and obviously because of the actions he took today, unilaterally. It just, to me, it's a harsh word, but it's really smacks to me it's just been a fraud perpetrated on us in regards to all the things that have been said. It's kind of like a bait and switch.
Look, in medicine, we all recognize there's 2 kinds of doctors. There's doctors who think a lot and doctors who do a lot. They generally do not reside in the same body. But this was one of those efforts that was brought by the thinking side, not the doing side. Had they consulted with doctors who were active in practice, had they consulted with hospital administrators who had to make things work, had they consulted with insurance executives who had to make things work, the product may have been vastly different. But this was a product of think tanks. This was a product of people who have some high-minded ideas, but very little practical experience. And again, I think we're living with that now.
Like I said earlier, I'm perplexed in regards to whether or not I even want to support this because first of all, I don't think the president has the authority to do what he's doing. I think every time you do an executive order on a piece of legislation and judge, I don't know how you would sit there and be able to judge something when you have the law in front of you, but you have 30 other things there that preempt the law because of an executive order. I just think that gets so messy and unwieldy. I don't know how you ever figure out what the original was.
Correct, and there's no stability going forward. So if we simply say the president has done an executive order, Congress doesn't have to do a thing, there is nothing to say that the president may not feel differently 2 weeks from now.
Of course.
Perhaps if public opinion has changed once again. But the Congress does have an obligation to fix problems. This is not going to fix the problems in the Affordable Care Act. This is going to solve a very specific problem, which is more people losing their coverage than people who are able to sign up. And in stemming that hemorrhage, it is, I think, appropriate for Congress to provide that first aid. But it is first aid. It is not solving any problem. And I think that needs to be emphasized at this hearing today. The solution to the problem would look vastly different than what we're working on today and would require a great deal more effort than the one-page bill that Mr. Woodall had held up today. I mean, you've got drafting errors. You've got errors throughout this thing because of the way it came to us. You weren't here then, but the Senate passed a bill on Christmas Eve. They always thought they'd go to a conference committee with the House, and Henry Waxman and Max Baucus would kind of figure things out, but they didn't go to a conference committee because they lost the Senate election. They didn't have 60 votes. Stop and think for a minute. Lyndon Johnson, would he have not passed the Civil Rights Act in 1958 if he lacked a single vote when he was majority leader in the Senate? Later on, when he was president, if he was on the precipice of passing Medicare, would he have stopped because, oh, I don't have 60 votes, I'll have to go tell the seniors they won't get Medicare? No, he would have gotten that 60th vote. He'd have moved heaven and earth to get that 60th vote. He wouldn't have said, well, go forward with an inferior product because it's really the best we can do, and we'll just fill in at a later date with some filler. And this is the result of that. It was an imperfect product that was visited upon this body, and again, I swear it must have been an accident. It was never intended to be signed into law. The dog ate my homework, so I turned in the rough draft. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on so long. I yield back.